Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today for our first of 3 panel sessions between Oracle Hospitality and Thrive. And to get us started and to tell us a little bit about the Thrive organization, we have Mary Wise. Mary, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Women in Travel Thrive. My name is Mary Wise, Analytics Manager at AirReach International, and of course, a proud board member of Thrive. Today, I am honored to join such great Oracle minds and industry leaders. Before we begin, let me explain what Thrive was built for. Women in Travel Thrive is a non-profit organization whose primary goal is to make connections and open doors for and between women across the travel and hospitality industry. We were born in September 2020 as a direct result of COVID-19 because we all saw the need. Ever since, we have launched several mentorship programs, educational events, scholarships, job openings, and lots of networking opportunities. Today, we are honored to have the support of brands like Oracle Hospitality that truly stand by our values and purpose. Last but not least, I want to finish by saying we are an open community and you can join for free. We always welcome volunteers and new partners to join our cause. Together, we are here to thrive. And now I will turn it over to the Oracle partners to get the recruiting panel started.
Okay, April, I think we can get started with our questions.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks again for joining the Oracle Hospitality and Thrive panel session, the recruiting edition. We're really happy to be partnering with Thrive on this event, and we hope that you get some key takeaways. We've built a great panel of some of our senior recruiting leaders, and they have a lot to share with you about their experiences, best practices, and just really helping you to get ready to take that next step in your career. So first, let's start with a couple of quick intros. How about we start with you, Amy?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Amy Littleton, and I am currently with at Oracle, obviously working on our sourcing team as a principal sourcing recruiter. And I recently joined Oracle. I joined in October. It seems so like just right around the corner. It's been an amazing experience and look forward to speaking with you all today.
Thanks, Amy. Jeff?
Thanks, April. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Otterson. I am a senior recruiting program manager here at Oracle. I support recruiting across all of North America for Oracle. I've been here for about 2 years now, and prior to this, I was a technical recruiter at Amazon, and I also did a little bit of time as a technical recruiter at Facebook, and in total, been in the recruiting world for 9 years now, which is pretty crazy. So really excited to share all of some really good experiences and hopefully some good advice with all of you.
Awesome. And just about me, I'm also one of the senior program managers here on the recruitment team at Oracle. And I have well over 10 years of recruiting experience, as well as some project and program management experience. So hopefully this conversation will be engaging and, you can get some great takeaways. As Courtney has put into the chat, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. We do have time for questions at the end. And if you just want to, hop in with those, that would be great. We do hope for this to be a good, casual conversation, but hopefully very engaging at the same time. So with all that being said, let's get started. So let's start. One of the first topics on our agenda is just really talking about networking. It's something that people always bring up. How do I network? How do I build my network? How do I use social media? What's too much when it comes to networking and all that good stuff? So let's just get started. Amy, I'm going to throw this subject to you first. Give us, kind of some of your ideas about your best networking tips for folks.
You bet. I think, one of the most important things when you first start taking a look at really expanding your network is really, look at your immediate network. Who's your family, your friends, those that you've worked with, you've had great experiences with. Think back to your previous colleagues, managers, and leads that you've had, and really reach out to those that you trust, those that you've worked with before, and let them know that you're, getting ready to maybe start a search, or you want to just expand your network and start talking about new opportunities. I think what's important to do prior to reaching out to them, though, is think about what you are looking at getting into and kind of what direction you would like to take your career, what opportunities you're looking to look at, because then that way that you can approach that with them. Sometimes it is networking to expand more of your knowledge base as well. It's not necessarily just a matter of who you know, but also kind of helping expand your knowledge base to understand what skills you have and maybe how you can, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit too, but maybe how you can take your skills currently and parlay them into a different direction even as well. So I think a lot of times it's reaching out to your initial network. It's beginning to build your presence within social media or within the community or within some of the national organizations or local organizations and groups as well. There's so many different organizations just like Here Today and others. And, I think once, COVID passes and things start opening up and you have that opportunity to get out there and be face to face with people, that's going to be really important too. And when you have an opportunity to get involved, and if that's something that really drives you, will be of importance too.
Yeah,
so I think those are a couple of good things.
Yeah, those were great. You opened up the topic of social media, and that's a really hot one as it relates to networking, because we really have unprecedented access to
Yes.
people, way more than we would have had, years back. So let's kind of talk about the social media side and also the etiquette that comes with that. And I guess both you and Jeff, if you have anything you want to jump in and share, let's go ahead and dig into that topic.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I would love to flip it over to Jeff to hear kind of his thoughts too in regards to, are there some other networking things and directions that we could go from an etiquette perspective and a preparation perspective? I think always what's key, and one of the things we were talking about recently, is the fact that you kind of also have to think of your on all the time. As much as I hate to say that, but when you're starting to look for a new opportunity and you're starting to look to join a new company, and not every company does this, but it is very much possible that they're going to look into your background, your social media, how are you presenting yourself? And so really that's huge, taking a look at your overall profile and ensuring that it's listing, the areas specifically that you want to work in and where you've had those skills and what those specific skills and experience have been that you have had as well will be really important. And ensuring that it's clean, it's crisp. Having a number of eyes review your information, your resumes as well, before you send out and or reach out to people, because I think that overall review to ensure that there's no, grammatical errors and other things like that are really important. But definitely, Jeff, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give a couple of my thoughts on networking. First, I'd like to start with why it's so important to network in today's day and age, trying to get into the workforce. Number one is, especially when it comes to companies like Oracle, Amazon, Facebook, all of these companies, just to give you an example, if we open a rec here at Oracle, right, usually a rec or a job requisition, usually that rec's going to have anywhere from 50 to 100 applicants within the first 2 weeks on that rec. So what that means is if you're another person who just applies to that rec, right, with no connection to a recruiter yet, you're just applying to the rec on the career site, you're going to be one of those 50 to 100 people. Typically, the hiring team is going to make a hire after looking through about the first 20 to 30 resumes. So that's why, it kind of feels like you just get put into this black hole of resumes, right? It's not because your resume is not good enough, or it's not because they didn't like your profile. A lot of the time, it's just because they're not seeing it. And without those network connections, it oftentimes can take a long time to get into the companies like this. I know, I don't think this is true for Oracle, but I know for Amazon and Facebook, they always said the average time it took to get hired at one of those companies is about a year. 6 months of that is going to be just getting contacted, just applying to roles. Then the other 6 months usually takes about two times going through their full interview process to pass, right? So I think we're a little bit less time than that, but not too far off, because it is a big company and a lot of people apply. So it is so important that you use your networking. Now, how you do that, I can speak to this from being a recruiter and a sourcer and a recruiting program manager, is when you reach out to a recruiter at one of these companies on LinkedIn, I think it's always good, number one, to tailor your LinkedIn account to the jobs you are interested in getting, right? So make those minor adjustments on your LinkedIn. It can really go a long way. And the other thing is go to that recruiter already having applied to a few recs. This is going to save the recruiter so much time. If you reach out to them and say, hey, these are the job requisitions I've applied to on your career site, and you list them, here's my resume. I'm really interested in speaking with you. Can you please help me along with my journey? This is huge. Now the TA or the sourcer can just say, wow, okay, I already know what rec numbers this individual's applied to. Let's talk to them and just let's set up a phone screen right then and there. I think those are really two key things that can help tremendously. And I know, Amy, you could probably speak to that since you're sourcing, right? Does that help?
And I'm on mute, sorry. You are right. I think you mentioned some great points, reaching out to the recruiter. I think also looking at your network. Do you know others who know somebody at that company as well? Sometimes just a quick introduction, which is amazing. And those introductions go an immense amount of direction, which is wonderful. And reaching out to the recruiter, the TA. And I think a lot of times too, if you've done your research and you know kind of which area, work stream or group that you're looking at within that company, sometimes you can also identify some of the management and some of the other key contacts and reach out to them and network with them as well. Because then when you come into the interviewing process, if a couple of people have heard your name and know that you're interested and you've reached out and shared, that can be very beneficial for you during the process.
Yeah, I mean, those are both really awesome. And I wanted to kind of come in and share my personal experience. I'm fairly new to the Oracle team, and I think I probably applied for at least 5 or 6 roles at this company because it's always been one of my top, kind of few companies that I thought I'd love to work for. And every time I would see a position that looked like it matched my background, I was like, I'm gonna apply. I know as a recruiter, I know that eventually you'll get seen. And that ended up that due diligence ended up working out in my favor. And then one other thing just to add as it relates to due diligence, if you contact a recruiter on LinkedIn, this is kind of maybe a little harsh to come across and say, but recruiters are inundated. And if you come to us saying, do you have a role for me at your company? That's the quickest way for that person to not be responsive and not give you the type of engagement that you're seeking, because unfortunately, we just have lots and tons on our plate. And as much as anybody who's in this profession, we love to help people, but we have deliverables, we have other things that, we have to manage. And unfortunately, we just can't, in most cases, be that personal career matchmaker. So come into the conversation prepared. These are the types of roles I'm interested in. These are the specific roles that I've applied for, as Jeff mentioned. I mean, that's really gonna help you go a lot further, a lot faster in the process, so.
And you just made a great comment, April. You said it took you about a year, you said?
Yep, about a year.
And for me, so what's really interesting, just to give you another quick hit and example, I said I started in October. I don't know what I was thinking. All my months kind of run together. I literally started the end of August, but a perfect example is I, fortunately had a very dear friend that I worked with at 2 different companies. He had shared a friend of his and a former colleague's posting that they were looking for sourcers here at Oracle. So I literally had seen that maybe a month and a half prior, maybe. So my process was extremely quick because I knew somebody who knew the person that was looking for the opportunity here, and he provided an introduction. So the minute I saw it, I immediately reached out to my friend and said, hey, I'm really interested. He introduced me to the recruiting manager who was looking for the opportunity to fill the opportunities on our team. And I think I interviewed with him maybe a week and a half later. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, I had my panel interviews. And it was literally within a month time, if even that, for me. So that's like a great example too of, how important it is if you just reach out or if you know people, if you let your network know. Because not only did I see his posting for that, I had let him know that I was taking a look at new opportunities. So he had reached out to me as well, fortunately, because you don't necessarily always see everything everybody posts all the time too, sometimes.
Sure. Awesome. Okay, now let's move on to interview skills. That's a super hot topic. And, in this virtual world that we're mostly living in right now, kind of still quasi virtual, in person kind of thing. And so many interviews are via Zoom. So let's talk about that. Zoom interview tips. How do you present yourself visually when you can't actually have that one-on-one interaction with an individual, and then just overall interview etiquette? I'm going to throw this one to Jeff first, and then Amy, if you have anything to add.
All right, so this is a topic I could talk about forever, but I'm going to start with some of the basics. I'm going to throw it over to Amy and we can kind of have a discussion about it. So as far as like how to present yourself, no matter what, always try to be on camera. If you're at the on-site stage, right now, prior to the on-site, you're likely going to have a phone interview. Of course, don't worry about having to be on camera for that. But during the on-site, do everything you can to be on camera and present yourself well. Right now, we all understand in times that we're in right now with COVID, nothing can be perfect. For example, the last week, my daughter's daycare was closed due to COVID, so I had her running around. April saw taking my temperature in the middle of meetings. So a lot of things we can't control. And maybe just let the interviewer know what your situation is ahead of time, just so they're aware, and then it should all be fine. And then as far as interview tips, right, for the industry, this is something I can speak a lot about because I've worked at 3 of these companies. The number one thing I want to say is, if you're not familiar with the STAR method, I would highly encourage you to get familiar with the STAR method. All of these companies in the tech world, right, train our interviewers to look for candidates to interview using the STAR method. So that stands for situation, task, action, result. You want to give the interviewer all of those data points. So that's very, very key. And the second thing that is going to be extremely important when interviewing for any of these companies is to look at the company's core values. This is often something that can be overlooked by a lot of candidates. Every company has core values. They're going to be posted on their website. If you go into their offices, it's probably going to be on the wall. A lot of people might think this is just something every company has, when in all reality, we live and breathe by these core values at Oracle. And again, same way for the other big tech companies. When we interview you, typically half of our interviews are going to be revolving around those core values, and the other half of the interview will be revolving around more of a technical piece or job-related function, right? But I would say that if you do better on the core value questions and worse on the technical questions, it's a better chance of getting hired than if you were to do better on the technical and worse on the core values. So they are so important. So before you interview with any of these companies, do your due diligence, do your research, and really study those core values, because I promise you they're going to be evaluated very, very heavily. Amy, do you have anything to add? I could go on forever, but I want to throw it to you.
No, you bring up great points. One, the core values and just being familiar with the role. And I think, taking a look at the job description and really being able to see and kind of try to picture yourself in that job description and kind of what you can bring to that job description. And if there's gaps and areas that you don't know, ensure that you ask questions about that so you understand what a day in the life of that person would look like. But I'm going to even back up even further as far as like just that prep process, because I know a lot of times people get really freaked out and it's a job interview. I really need this. And, if it is, many of us, we need to work, and don't come across desperate, I think is probably what I want to point out really at that point, and just get comfortable and know that it's just a conversation, right? I think a lot of times people are very, very nervous. And I think I'm sure, Jeff and his style, I know my style, probably even April before, we want you to feel comfortable because I want you to talk comfortably about what you're doing. So if you can even just shift it as looking at it as this is a conversation with somebody to help me enhance my career versus this is an interview or I'm being judged, shift that paradigm to really look at this as a conversation for me to really find my best place and the best place for me to be and the best place for me to get and add value and receive value back. And I think, in that preparation process, it's really important to get comfortable with your skill set and talking about yourself. I think one of the things I always recommend too is, talk through your resume, talk about what you do, talk about your projects in and around the house. I know that sounds really weird, but with Zoom, a lot of times now people, being on Zoom, it's hard because you don't necessarily know where to look. You don't know if you're feeling like you're engaging that person. So, I think some of the things that are really important is, think about your background and where you're at and your space that you're in so that it's plain and clear and it looks professional, or put a virtual background up. But I think also just talk through your resume and talk about your experiences to yourself. Look in the mirror in the morning and talk about it so you can get comfortable talking through your experiences and what your roles were and whatnot. So then when you get on that camera, you can just sit and talk and you can sit and have that conversation. And it's the same thing for when you come come face to face as well. And one of the other things that I would say too is, even for phone interviews, you might not necessarily be on video, but to help with your energy, and how you're coming across, sometimes it's nice to just walk around, when you're having that conversation and talking to somebody, because then you're not necessarily fully focused on the conversation and everything going on, but you can walk and talk through your experience and it comes across much more easy and flowing. And even when you're doing your interview, if you need to talk when you're on Zoom face to face, if you can find a space to just stand. I notice sometimes, candidates seem a little bit more at ease when they're standing versus sitting as well. And they almost know what to do with themselves more so. I would take it from that preparation perspective too, and incorporate the things that Jeff had shared are all great tips.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Sorry, I had cut out my VPN dropped a second ago, so I went away. So I didn't hear all of the answers, but I wanted to add, I don't know if anyone said this, your interview is as much an opportunity for that company to view you as it is for you to view that organization, and make sure that you can see yourself there growing as a professional. I know this organization is very heavy women focused, and a lot of us are moms and wives and everything and children. And, we have multiple types of opportunities. Multiple types of responsibilities, things that we have to be responsible for outside of just going to work every day. So when you're interviewing that company, come to the table with questions about the culture. Do you value, me as a holistic individual, not just somebody that's here to do a job, and those sorts of things. And to me, that should make you feel more comfortable because you're level in the playing field. And then the organization knows that this is a person that takes not only their career seriously, but their whole life, kind of seriously. So that's something, it should give you a boost of confidence to know that you're bringing something to the table. It's not just the company offering you a paycheck kind of thing. So awesome. All right, so let's see. I think we can move on to our next topic, resume prep. So this is another, kind of hot topic. I always get pinged from people from every facet of my life saying, "Help me with my resume. Can you take a look? You've been doing this for so long." That sort of thing. And first piece of advice I would say is ask somebody to look at your resume. Even if it's, not a professional HR person, just, a family member or a friend or anything, that someone that you respect their writing skills, ask for help. But I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So as it relates to resume prep, let's start with Amy on this one. Give us kind of your best top tip, something that you can't find on Google, something that you've seen on a resume and you're like, no, or something you've seen on a resume and you're like, more of this.
That stands out.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
I think one of the best things to keep in mind is, every recruiter, every sourcer is thinking about how they want it, right? I think one of the best things to do is always remember clean, crisp, clear action items as far as what you've done and how you've done them. You've managed, you've owned, you've led, going off of the keywords is very, very important. But I really think, when you can make it as simple for the reviewer as possible to clearly see chronologically, from where you are now to where you've come from, is very, very important. And keep it short, as succinct as possible. It just really gives those that are reviewing it the most efficient way to review your resume. So if you can have a really impactful, summary, I like to refer to it as that 40,000 foot introduction, in a sense, that quick hit. Somebody would be able to tell what you can do within your summary, quick, hopefully, but then give us the details and share that quantitative and qualitative information. If you have, if you're in sales, for example, and you have sold X percent of, and you've met X percent of goal expected, things like that. So they can see not only this is what your role and expectations were, but this is how you met it as well. And as much as you can share those things and be as specific and concise, steer clear of personal information. I know nowadays, I think, I've seen a lot of pictures. A lot of people have been putting pictures on their resumes. Everybody's different. You have to be very, very comfortable and own that. If you want to place your picture on there, do. I don't think it's necessarily of importance. I think it's what's important is really what you've done and how can you present that and how your presence and your being and what you're able to bring to the table during your interviews is what's most important. So really just keeping it basic and in short, like you had mentioned, have a bunch of people review it. I think that's also important, ensuring that there's no grammatical errors in your spacing and whatnot. Send it to people so that they can tell you what it looks like when they receive it as well. But also have your colleagues review it, because those that have worked with you sometimes also will give you the great insight of things and skill sets that you have that you've not highlighted that may be very important for somebody else to review too. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, those are all really, really good points. Having someone else review it, I know it's like the third time we've said it, but it is so important, and send it to them on your computer. Great example is when I first started this process a couple years, 4 years ago now, of getting into the tech world. I sent my resume over to a friend who was already in tech, and I emailed it over, and I didn't realize that when I sent it, the margins were pretty small. So it actually cut off quite a bit of my resume, but on my screen, it looked fine. So if I wouldn't have sent it over there, I would have never known. I would have uploaded my resume with half the stuff missing. So that is just a small example of why it is so important. Do a trial send out, right, to somebody else, and just have them double check it. Another thing is, I think the average time industry-wide a recruiter spends looking at a resume is somewhere between 5 and 7 seconds. Like I was saying, we've got hundreds of applications to go through. Recruiters are usually not sitting there, really reading the entire resume to its fullest, right? We're looking for a couple keywords to hone in on to really draw our attention. So that's where it really comes into play, that you customize each resume to each job you're going to apply for. Like April said earlier, don't hesitate to apply to more than one role at a company. I actually encourage that. But with that being said, if they are different roles, tailor each resume to that role, right? So for example, if I'm applying to a software engineering role, instead of a front-end engineering role, I'm going to put, back-end API work at the very top of that resume, because I know that's what the recruiters are going to be looking for. So keep that in mind. It is extra legwork up front for you to make multiple resumes, but I promise you it will pay off. Look at that job description, really study it, find out what they're actually looking for in terms of key skill sets, and try to put those at the top and put a lot of that in there for that particular job. It really can increase your chance of getting seen. And also length of resume, right? Try to keep it at 1.5 pages or lower, 2 pages at the most. Like I said, recruiters for the most part aren't going to be looking through your entire resume, especially if it's longer than 2 pages. So try to keep it pretty condensed and really only highlight the key areas that need to be seen. Also, when applying to big tech companies, this goes for all of them, data and metrics are key. Try to put as many data and, as much data and metrics in your resume as possible. For me, I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. I came out of the Marine Corps, applied right to these tech companies. I was like, well, how do I do that? I was in the infantry. I don't understand how I put data and metrics in there. It was something as simple as putting something like, when I was in Afghanistan, I was responsible for $1.3 million worth of combat gear, resulting in 6% loss and 5% damage upon return. That right there, data and metrics, really goes a long way, and it's something that recruiters and hiring managers like to see at these big tech companies. I hope that helps. I think that's all I had for resume prep.
Great. Those are great tips. Whenever I do a panel and we talk about resumes, I always bring up this story of several years ago. As I was a recruiter at a major university here in Metro Atlanta, and I received a resume from someone that was, and this is not a fabrication at all, it was 17 pages long. It was single spaced. and the margins were like, words were bleeding off the page. The person had gone back to 1979 in their resume. There were jobs on there for companies that were defunct, like companies that have gone out of business years ago. That's how, and so, you know, when we say stuff like, and that's an extreme example. I know that, you know, it's not, you know, expecting that people would do that. But when we say keep your resume succinct, we mean keep it relevant to the roles, keep it relevant timing wise. You know, generally I say, you know, pretty much don't go back more than 10, 15 years. Because if you go back too far, a lot of, even if it's technical, a lot of the skills and stuff you acquired back then, companies aren't using nowadays. So it just takes up space on the resume. And honestly, you know, people are just not going to read that far back. So save your time and energy and focus on, you know, the most recent skills, most recent experience, and keep it relevant to the role. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway when you talk about resume prep.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would point out to April is the only time that you really want to maybe pull something way out from the past is if you're looking to flip back to something like that, for example. So, you know, I think of like, I'll just use myself, for example. I started in higher education many years ago, recruiting high school students to come to that college or university. Obviously, now I'm in corporate. So if I decide I want to go back to higher education, for example, that was 20 plus years ago. But I think what is beneficial in a way that you can do it is one, yes, I've heard a lot of people say that 10 to 15 years here more recently, everybody has kind of referred it to as your living. You know, when you fill out an application, they ask you how long you've lived at a place. You know, ideally they're looking for 7 to 10 years is what people have kind of said here recently. But then if you're looking to go back at the bottom of your resume, you can highlight previous work experience and literally just go ahead and note it as such and put the company and maybe the timeline in your title so that it brings attention to it. If you're making a job shift, for example, somebody could then highlight, as you'll see in my resume, I've, you know, previously 20 years ago, I worked in and looking to make a shift back. Here are some of the relevant experiences I've had over the years, but I have worked in this type of opportunity before, and that's why I'm drawn to this. You know, there's ways that you can always kind of intertwine and somehow bring it back to relevancy too. So you can put it on there, but definitely you don't need 17 pages is definitely a lot.
Too much.
Yeah, we barely get past the first.
Right. Well, you actually created a great segue for us, Amy, because we wanted to shift the conversation now to job hunting. You know, transferable skills, if you are wanting to retrovert back to something you've done in the past, or if you're just looking to kind of make a career pivot, any tips that you have around that? And I'll start with you and then we'll bounce it over to Jeff.
Yeah, I think, you know, just it's so important to really look at what are the relevant work skills and skill sets that you're looking to do. So I think what's important is if you really want to make a pivot and shift to a role similar in the same industry, or even if it's outside of that industry, just look at what you want to do and kind of what are the core skill sets and expectations for that role that you want to get to. And then take a look at what you've done and really try to identify those skills that are transferable, that are similar. It may be, you know, done the exact same thing, it's just in a different industry. A lot of skills, it doesn't matter what the industry is, you can learn the industry, you know, and sometimes if it's too much of a stretch, then you can know that, hey, you know what, I want to jump and make this move, but I might be missing this. And could you take a class? Could you do YouTube? Could you, you know, do some own training and some shadowing and things like that to gain that experience so then you can be more presentable for the opportunity too. Or you just simply know the gaps. You know, I've had many people say, hey, I'm really interested in this and here's my transferable and relatable skill sets, but I know I don't have this and this, but I'm very comfortable and confident that I can learn it. I'm interested in taking those training courses, or point out what you would do to obtain that skill as well that can really help set you apart. And again, like, you know, Jeff and April both mentioned, it's important to highlight on your resume what you're looking for. And this is really a great place to make that shift to making it a very specific resume for that opportunity and role as well. What do you think, Jeff?
That's all really awesome stuff. Yeah, there's a lot to cover here, but in terms of making a career pivot, I think one of the best ways to do that, especially since everyone here for the most part is women, look at the programs each of these companies are running, these specialized programs. I run two of them here at Oracle that are dedicated to women. Essentially, right? One of them is the Oracle Career Relaunch Program. This is bringing people back into the workforce that have been out for a year or longer. Another one is the ADA Academy, which is women coders that we bring in. We have more as well, but be confident out there. I mean, if you're a woman in today's workforce, you're industry gold. So you need to be confident when you're out there applying, and check for these special programs, because oftentimes these are going to be the fastest ways into a completely new role, right? If you want to do that, make that career switch, that is really the way to get in. So do your due diligence, go to the company that you're interested in, go to their career site, check out those special programs they have, find out when they're starting. Maybe they're not starting for a few more months, but mark it on your calendar and prep yourself and be ready to apply to that program and start reaching out to people and letting them know you're interested, because that is probably the best way to make that career switch. If you're not going to do that, I would say, be ready for a little bit of a journey, right? It's not going to be quick. It's not going to happen overnight. Even if you're entered right into our hiring process, it's probably going to be about 2 months till you're started. And that's if you get right into the hiring process. Like I said before, usually it takes about 6 months to a year to get into this new role. So I think the biggest piece of advice is don't get discouraged. Apply to multiple roles. Don't give up. Keep making alterations to your resume. Keep networking. And just hang in there, because it will happen for you. And also, when it comes to interviewing, most of the time people don't pass the interviews on the first shot. So really go into the first interview, go into it confident, but just be okay if you don't get the offer the first time, and be ready to go back and give it a second shot. There was one more thing I wanted to cover here. This is something I often tell veterans, but I think it applies to really everybody. When it comes to companies like Oracle, Amazon, these types of companies, really focus on just getting in. It might not be your dream role right off the bat, but that is perfectly okay, because once you're in these companies, we really encourage movement within the company. We actually look at it as a positive thing. If you're on multiple different teams and multiple different roles over a number of years, it's positive. It looks really good, and it often gives you better chances of moving up. So I always tell people, just focus on getting in. What happens after that is completely up to you, and you'll see it's very easy to move up, move around. And it's actually even really easy to move around within the tech companies, right? Everybody knows each other in these Oracle, Amazon, Facebook type companies. And you're going to know people at other companies. And if you want to make some moves, it's very easy to do so once you're in, but just focus on getting in. I'm a great example. I started 3 years ago in the big tech world as a contract sourcer. It only took me about 3 years to get to where I am now as a senior recruiting program manager. So like I said, don't focus on getting that dream job right off the bat. Just focus on getting in. And after that, the sky really is the limit for you all.
Yeah, and
Awesome,
at that
awesome.
point too, I was just going to say too, at that point, Jeff makes a great point. It's just about your performance. It's that time for you to shine once you get there.
Yeah, those are huge, huge, huge. Okay. So, and this is probably the hottest topic as we're kind of winding to the end. And then after we finish this segment, we will take audience questions. So those of you who have had questions, please hang in there with us. But we wanted to address the topic of salary negotiations. This is a big one. It's big for everybody, but it's especially impactful for women, the gender differences, and also for the different ethnicities. A lot of times, a lot of people just kind of grew up with the mentality of you just take whatever they give you, don't ask any questions, put your head down, do your work, that whole thing. And, we're looking for career and family sustaining, livelihoods, right? We want to do better than just the bare minimum. So, so you've gone through the interview, you've done the networking, you've done the job hunting, you've gone through the interview, and now you're getting your offer. Now, what do you do? And how do you kind of navigate that? So let's start with Jeff on this topic.
Sure. Thanks, April. So this is a very important topic to discuss. So I want to start with once you get that offer, right? So what's happening behind the scenes when you receive that offer? So when you receive an offer, and this isn't just for Oracle, all these companies, right? Once you receive an offer, you have passed the interview. You have shown yourself as somebody who this company wants. Once you pass this, they will do whatever it takes to land you at this company. Okay. Now, there is ranges, right? Every company has ranges, how high they can go. So, we can only go so high. But with that being said, you should not feel bad about asking for, what you may think is a lot of money, because the worst thing that is going to happen is that recruiter's going to come back to you and say, listen, we can't get there, but we can get here. There's this consensus out there, I think, that if you ask for a lot of money, it like looks bad upon you, or they might rescind your offer, and that is not the case at all. There is literally 0% chance of that happening. Like I said, they are going to do whatever it takes to land you once you pass that interview process. So I want you to feel confident once you get to this point. Also, the data shows that women are actually less likely to ask for more money than men are. And this may contribute to that gender pay gap that we see out there, right? So be confident and go in there asking for what you want. Another thing, don't tell them what you currently make. Okay, this is a mistake that I see all the time. We are legally not even allowed to ask you what you make anymore at your current company. So we don't ever have to know. So don't ever give them that. They're not going to ask you, but don't make the mistake of giving them that, because once you give them that, they're going to be like, oh, okay. Like if we just offer her the same or maybe a little bit more, we already know she's, that the candidate's going to take it. So please don't make that mistake. But again, feel confident in going in there and asking for more money, right? I just went through this with my wife, actually. She just got an offer from a company, and she was like, I don't want to negotiate. I'm like, no, you have to. You have to at least ask. If you don't negotiate at least once, you really are doing yourself a disservice. I mean, really missing an opportunity. Like I said, they're going to do anything they can to land you at that point. So I want you to feel very, very confident going in there with a number you have in your mind and trying to get there. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to say, we can't get there, we can come close, or we can get here. Amy, do you have anything to add to all that?
Yeah, I think, take the time, do some research as well, kind of know where you're at, look at Glassdoor. There's a couple of different, I can't think of them right now, but it will come to me. I can share them with you, different places that you can check to look at what the average is. And no, yes, right up front, even that first conversation, they may ask, or more than likely are going to ask, what is your salary expectations, or what are you looking for? And be confident in it. I think that's what's most attractive for a recruiter to hear, is somebody saying, I'm looking for 60 to 70. Minimally, I could take 80 or 75. It's notice I jumped up on it. But know what your range is and what your minimum would be. That's the other thing that I would think about too, because we all know we all have bills. We all have a minimum, kind of what is that you're not going to be able to and willing to go below, and be confident in it, because with all of the changes now, I think with the laws changing and things like that, this is a great opportunity for people to really recognize that they should and can get paid for the skill set that they bring. It shouldn't matter, your gender or anything else, but what are the skills that you're bringing to the table, and how can you impact it and bring great service to them? So being aware of that and having that conversation. But I would say definitely know your range and know your minimum is really what is most important. And when you are negotiating up, kind of think of, hey, it's kind of like I like to say almost like the typical negotiation of, okay, I really would like to be about 5K more. So maybe go 8K higher or 10K, knowing it's going to come down a little bit and settle in. So kind of go higher, but don't be like, hey, I want 75K more, be realistic in what that comeback is. And remember what you noted to the recruiter when you initially spoke to them, because I think that's also important, because you're building a relationship with this person and you want to have trust in them, because one of the roles, of a recruiter is is speaking on your behalf and helping identify what we could offer you as well. So in that, being honest and open as much as you can with them and giving them that detail so that they have the ammo to work with their hiring managers to be able to be your advocate as well, so that they can and speak for that. But I've, had many candidates tell me, hey, this is my range. And when I come back on the back end to say, hey, we're ready to move forward, we're really looking, continue to move forward, just wanted to touch base from a compensation perspective again, confirm where you're at. I've had many people come back and say, oh, well, after further, review, or after really thinking about it and talking to everybody, actually I'm looking for this, and they give me this 20K bump. If that's the case, mention that earlier in the conversation, and kind of have those conversations and be open with your recruiter and your key contacts as well. You don't necessarily have to always have that with the hiring manager, but the recruiter is a good person to talk through that with, and then come back with those realistic, expectations or, requests to negotiate as well.
You brought up a really good point, Amy. That initial salary conversation you have with the recruiter is so important, because that, to what Amy was saying, I've seen that happen so many times where a candidate will give me a number the very first time I talk to them, because the recruiters aren't going to ask the first time you talk to them on the phone. We're going to ask. So be prepared. You need to be prepared to give that number right then and there. Because if you come back after you get the offer and ask for $40,000 more than you initially told us, we're going to be like, no, okay, no, we're going to offer them what they initially told us, right? So be ready during that first conversation. And another great point Amy said is, find a number that, what I always like to do is I always think, wow, what would be a really good salary for this job, right? Like, what would be like my dream salary for this job? That's not crazy out of the range, right? I think of that, and then I usually add 10, 20, 30,000 to it. And then I go in, and that's what I start my negotiations with, because at that point, it gives me a better chance, right, of hitting that dream salary that I was talking about. So just a lot of good things to think about, but I think overall, be confident, really know what you're worth. Another thing that I do want to hit on is, I know we said research what your skills are worth. I find often is lower than what is really out there to me. I always think that it's quite a bit off on the lower side. I think pay scale and I think it's comparability are a lot closer. Just some research tools, because I don't want people researching lower numbers and going in there and getting less than what they can. So take what you see on Glassdoor with a grain of salt. I think that is often on the lower end. Just my opinion, though.
Yeah, and a lot of companies now, just with wage transparency, a lot of companies are starting back publishing their pay ranges. It's something that, I used to see a lot when I first got into this industry, and then it went away for a long time, but it seems like it's coming back. And so when you see those numbers out there, use that to your advantage. Okay, so I wanted to kind of get to some questions. We've been having a great conversation, and we're coming down to the wire here. So let's just kind of bump through these and see what our panelists think. Or that's my timer. Okay, so do you think candidates have better odds at clearing a Zoom interview or over an in-person interview, given that they don't have to worry so much about their body language, and they might be more comfortable in their home setting? This is just kind of your personal opinion. Anybody can jump in on this.
Geez, that's a good one. Honestly, it might be. It's hard to say. I think one of the things that I meant to say earlier is always remember that you're on. Is from beginning to end. It is a little different now because you're on Zoom versus when you go into an office. But I've always told people, think about from beginning to end. The first time that somebody contacts you to get connected and schedule a phone screen, and how your presence and how you're presenting yourself with them from beginning to end. As much as we hate to say you're being observed, you are, and that's going to be a huge part of it. I think Zoom is honestly still a very good resource in being able to engage a person and have that conversation with them and understand their presence and understand culture, and if it would be a good fit, and everything else over Zoom. Everybody's going to come differently. So I think, the more comfortable that you can get with how you present yourself and how you can sit and feel comfortable in that setting is going to be important.
Yeah, it's tough to say which one. I think it's almost down to personal preference at that point. But what I will say is get comfortable with the virtual interviews, because I really don't think they're going away for a long time. I think companies have realized how much money they can save doing these virtual interviews and not spending $5,000-$10,000 flying each candidate out to Seattle or Austin or wherever it may be. So I think I really believe, I haven't heard anything, but it's just my what I think is going to happen. I think these are going to be here to stay for at least the next year or two. So I would get very comfortable with the Zoom interviews.
Yeah, and if you think about it, when we put our kind of diversity lens on this, the capabilities that the technology has given to us really helps us to have a broader reach. I mean, again, I know we're talking to an organization that's largely women, so a lot of us are moms. If you think about what it takes, if you're a mom and you want to interview, and you have 2 or 3 kids at home, and you're like, okay, I got to fly wherever for a job interview. The kids have to be taken care of, the spouse, all of the stuff that you used to would have to do. That barrier is gone, and it means that you can apply for an interview for opportunities that you might not have been able to interview for otherwise. So, okay, awesome. So let's move on. So this is a really hot question. How important are references? I don't want my current employer to know that I'm interviewing for other positions. How do I go about providing a professional reference?
I just laugh. I honestly have not called or utilized or leveraged or asked for a reference in probably 10 or 15 years. And it can, some companies still have that, and it is part of the process, but most have not. And I think, it's largely, and Jeff can speak to this, the largest part of the thought is you're going to tell me, and you're going to give me a list of names and people that I can call that will speak positively of you. So time-wise, efficiency-wise, really a lot of companies have stepped away from it because the viewpoint is that's not necessarily going to be the best perspective. Now, do companies still kind of look for references, or recruiters or people and executives maybe still get references on you? More than likely, yes. In some industries, when it's tight-knit, even if you think it's not tight-knit, I've been in consulting, for example, for years, and I've worked with, Accenture and PwC and big consulting companies. A lot of them know each other. So, there's still a lot of the behind the scenes. Hey, April, I just talked to somebody who worked at a company with you before. Do you happen to know this person? What are your thoughts? So, we don't necessarily ask for the formal, but sometimes the informal can happen. And I think that that's important. And I think that's why it comes back to when you initially start looking, it's important to kind of give your network a heads up. Hey, I'm starting to look, and this is what I'm looking for, and this is why I'm looking, so that they're aware. So if somebody does ask, they have insight to that, because that's huge. Because if I reach out to somebody and they say, hey, yep, I talked to Jeff, I know Jeff's looking for a new opportunity, where he's at right now, he's done some amazing things, but he hasn't been recognized for it. Or, he's just feeling that he can't get the growth or whatever. Sometimes those things can also help and really benefit you in that overall interviewing process too. But I wouldn't worry about references, but I would think about who your reference people are and letting them know and touch base with them and helping them, asking them to help you network as well and get in and get connected to people more so from that perspective.
Yep. Okay, I want to jump to the next one, Jeff, and you can take this one. Is it okay, and we talked about this a little bit before, is it okay to apply to different roles within a company? But the caveat to that one is, how do recruiters perceive getting multiple requests from the same person? Do you look desperate? And, at what point should you stop applying for jobs at that company?
Great question. So I always tell people it is perfectly fine if you go out and apply to 5 roles in one company. Even maybe up to 7 roles is going to be okay. Now, I have ran into people that have applied to 20 to 50 roles at the exact same company. And at that point, like, all the recruiters just kind of know, okay, this person's not really taking any job seriously. They're just out here, throwing their resume out to every job that looks good to them. So I would say 5 is a good number, right? And you're not looking desperate at all at that point, especially if all these jobs are very closely related to each other. You're really just doing the right thing and just getting your name out there. But don't do any more than, I would say 10 would be the maximum. At that point, it's starting to be like, okay, this person's just kind of throwing their resume out there. So I would say 5 to 10, and you're going to be good.
Yep, and within a year, within about a year time frame, I would kind of put a caveat around this. Okay, so let's see. Let's move on. We have 3 minutes, and so I'm going to try to combine 2 of these into one question. Let's see. So we kind of talked about that already. What do we say when they ask for salary and we have no idea what their range is? We kind of touched on that, but can somebody just kind of give a succinct answer to that one?
Sure. So if you don't know what the range is, there's 2 things you could do. Now, if you're talking about the initial conversation with the recruiter, it's perfectly okay for you to say something like, you know what, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I'm just focused on the interview and getting through that. You can totally say that with the recruiter, and that's perfectly fine. Now, if you're talking about the offer side, this is when it comes in, doing your own research does come into play, because you have to give them a number, right? And I typically don't like to wait for them to give me a number. I want to be the first one to give them a number, so it lets them know where my head is at. And in that case, if you don't know what the range is, shoot for the stars. I mean, really, don't go out there and ask for $300,000 a year. But I'm just saying, ask for something that you would be that would be life-changing for you, right? That you would say, wow, if I had an extra however much, a month, this would be life-changing. And that's what I would ask for to start out. That would be my advice. Amy, do you have anything on that one?
Yeah, I would say that. I think I was just thinking through it kind of in my head. Many people will say, just to give you an example, I'm making 90K, let's just say I'm making 90 base. And, ideal would be getting to 100. That's where I really would want, that would make a change in my house. 10K, because what's 5K really going to do? Honestly, I mean, I know that is a common denominator, Jeff knows, for us to come in at 5K, but that's where it's going to be important. Kind of know that's kind of a common number for recruiters to negotiate is 3, 5, 3, 5, maybe add a 2 in there, and coming back and forth. So sometimes you don't really think, where's that high? So if it's 10, maybe go 15, because again, we can't ask what you're making now. Period. So if I had a role that I know that my range is 90 to 130, for example, just as throwing it out there, I have no clue, but just throwing that out, say, for example, it is that high, we've got some broad room. And yeah, sometimes where your base is, because of a lot of the adjustments going on just across many companies, your base could be, and you could be underpaid and you could be under that range. So that's why it is such a interesting space to be. Know where you're at and what you want, but also kind of hold it close to the cuff and just wait for them to ask, but be prepared and be confident in it. Because then when you're confident, then we know, if they're serious, they know what their value is and what they can bring to the table. And let me make those adjustments. And then we'll come back and say, hey, we can't, but we could, like Jeff mentioned earlier, maybe get here. And then the conversation's on. So that's where it's important to know. But I would say that 10K minimally, give yourself that bump and go from there. And if it's even 20, again, no one knows. If you've done your research and you see, that's important to keep in mind.
Awesome. Well, we're right at 12 o'clock. I mean, this has been a really good conversation. I want to just remind a couple of housekeeping things. We do have 2 more panels this week, one tomorrow and one on Thursday. And also, as coming to you all from the Oracle recruitment or talent advisory function, we have been sharing our open roles within the Thrive Slack channel. We will continue to do that. We hope that some of you have been intrigued by what you've heard from the Oracle recruitment team and maybe want to take a further look at some of our open opportunities. We would love to get you into some interview process. Feel free to reach out to myself. I'm sure Amy or Jeff also would be open to having you reach out to them on LinkedIn. And I think that wraps us up for today. Courtney, did you have anything to close us out?
I just want to say thank you so much to Amy, Jeff, and April, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. This has been a great session, and we hope to see you all at the other 2.
Listen,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.